Before we get into today's video, I do want to let you guys know that this video is for entertainment purposes only. Please remember to be kind to everybody everywhere in your everyday life, in your home, in the grocery store, and especially in the comment section down below. Please do not show hate to anybody, anywhere. Good morning, my lovelies, my beauties, my friends. My name is Christina and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for clicking on this video. I really hope that you will subscribe, stick around, take a chance in hearing some things that I have to say. And if you are a returning subscriber, y'all already know. Y'all are my babies. So good morning, good morning, good morning. How is everybody doing today? I hope you all are having an amazing day. So in today's video, I have been completely engulfed in this story of yet another perfect family. Yes, it's one of those. Before we get into it though, some of y'all may have noticed that I'm missing my wedding ring. If you're following me on my Instagram, then you know what happened. You guys, the big diamond in my ring, like it came out. I'm literally at the dentist office with the whole half side of my face completely numb, up my nose, everything, to the point that when I sat up out of the chair at the dentist office, I started drooling on myself because I couldn't feel anything. Super hot, you guys. Ugh. And I look down and my diamond is missing from my ring. And I'm literally drooling all over the place, turning the dentist office upside down. And it was in my bed, thankfully. So now my ring is in the shop. Have any of y'all ever had that happen to you guys? A nightmare. Anyways, so in today's video, we're going to be talking about Jerry Michael Williams. Have y'all heard about this story? Jerry Michael Williams, who goes by Mike, the guy who got eaten by alligators, right? Well, that's what people thought for a long time. So let's just start at the beginning. Jerry Michael Williams, who was born on October 16th, 1969, was raised in Bradford, Florida. It's over there near Tallahassee, Florida. He was the son of a Greyhound bus driver and a daycare worker. Him and his older brother were very close as well. He was very close with his mom. He grew up in a double-wide trailer. They did not have much money at all. Matter of fact, Mike and his older brother Nick had to get jobs as soon as they were able to get jobs and help out with the bills. His mother, however, would save all of her money. That way, when the boys got into high school, that she could put them in a private school there. So they went to North Florida Christian School. So that is where they lived in the double wide, saved all their money, and she took all of her money and made sure her boys went to a really great school. And then also when they started working in high school, they were bagging groceries at nighttime and helping give that money to their mom, like I told you guys earlier. So these were really, really good boys. Mike, when he was in high school, he really excelled. I mean, he did fabulous. He was the president of his class. He was a football player. He was an all-around good guy, did volunteer work. He was just that guy. And at the age of 15, which was about 9th grade, he started dating a young girl named Denise Merrill. Now, him and Denise had been friends since middle school. This is a small town. Everybody pretty much knows everybody. And at this time, Mike's best friend's name was Brian Winchester. And Brian Winchester started dating a young girl in 9th grade with them named Kathy. So it was the four of them. So Kathy and Denise were best friends, and Brian and Mike were best friends, and all four of them they clicked up. They stayed together all through high school, then all through college. They went to FSU, and then soon after that, the couples became married. Now, these couples, they did everything together. They went to the movies together. They went to football games together. I mean, Mike, who I told you played football, his girlfriend, Denise, she was actually a cheerleader. So this was what you would consider the picture perfect couple, right? They go to a Christian school, they, work hard, and he helps his mom, and he does volunteer work, and he's dating the cheerleader, their high school sweethearts. His best friend is also dating his high school sweetheart. The four of them, they're all best friends. They all get, this is like a Saved by the Bell episode, basically, right? When Mike was in college, he started working at this property appraising office, and his boss would later say that Mike was the hardest working young man he had ever seen. So, I mean, he's in college and already working a really good job. When he finished college, he got a job as a realtor to where he, again, excelled. He was doing great, making wonderful money, and before you know it, him and Denise got married. Now, Mike's mom loved Denise. She said that she thought Denise was perfect for her son. They just meshed so well together. Mike's mom and brother just loved Denise as well. And so they got married in 1994, and Brian, who was his best friend, and Kathy got married in 1994 as well. I mean, they were just perfect little friends, right? Now, Mike was a hunter. He loved to duck hunt and do any kind of hunting that he could. Him and Brian would go hunting all the time. They started doing that in high school, continued to hunt all the way through college, and just that was their hobby. They would get in a boat, the two best friends, they'd go sit out there, they'd be quiet, they'd wait for a duck to come, they'd put on all their duck hunting gear, probably had one of those, duck whistles, whatever, and that was their hobby. That's what they did for fun. Now, in 1994, after they got married, Mike bought a home for him and his now wife, Denise, in a really upscale neighborhood. It wasn't a super large house because it was just them two at this point, but it was very, very nice. And at this point, Denise didn't even have to work. She didn't want for nothing. I mean, at this young age, Mike was a young married guy. He was already making $200,000 a year. And this is back in the 1990s. I mean, $200,000 a year now is incredible money. And then you're thinking about, almost 30 years ago. I mean, he was doing wonderful. She was living the dream. She had all the nice clothes. She went and got her hair done when she wanted. She drove a brand new car. She lived in this beautiful home in a very, very nice neighborhood. And, Mike just felt like the struggle that he had went through, with his mom and growing up in this double wide trailer and having to work to pay for basically his own high school experience, right? That he wanted to give the best things to his wife and his future children. And he just really valued that. He had strong morals, strong values, and he worked hard to provide all of those things. In 1999, Denise and Mike had a little girl, and he was so excited to be a dad. He was a big, big family guy. And his friend Brian and Kathy, they actually had a son the same year. So you guys, are you getting this picture of these people? I mean, it's the best friends, and they're married to the best friends, and they got married the same year, and they had babies the same year, and they were just so close. Now, around this time, the couples really started going out drinking a lot together and partying. Brian would later say that they started doing all of the things then at this age that they probably should have done in like high school and college.
We all started going out a lot.
And we stop you right there, we all being who?
My wife and I, Kathy and Denise and Mike, we started going out to bars and concerts and drinking and doing a lot of things that we didn't really do while we were all in college, when probably it's more appropriate to do those sorts of things. But we started going out, a lot of drinking.
Brian would later testify that the four of them were out one night drinking, and they all got into conversations about relations.
But one night in particular, there were several nights that we did this, but one night in particular, we started talking about sex a lot.
Good we.
The four of us. And I I was friends with Denise in middle school and high school, but I was never attracted to her until that point.
Well, that night, Brian said, was the first time that he started looking at his best friend Mike's wife, Denise, in a different light. Like they were giving each other eye contact and pretty much, I guess, saying things that were kind of making each other hot. And then before you know it, they started talking on the phone behind their husband and wife's back.
And so later that night, after Kathy and I went home and Mike and Denise went home, she and I got on the phone together, and we basically spent the whole night talking to each other on the phone. And it was just like, I don't know, we connected like nobody else. I mean, we just really connected, and we had a lot of sexual talk and had phone sex and that sort of thing.
So now it is Mike's wife and his very best friend since Before high school, Brian would later say that he would go to wherever she was at the time. If she was working a little job at this point, although she did not have to work, he would go up to her lunch breaks. She would come out to the car and they would get down in the car. And then she quit sleeping with her husband completely. Brian quit sleeping with his wife, Kathy, completely. And they were just kind of like in this relationship together, even though they were both married to their husband and wife. Denise would later complain that Mike was a workaholic. He worked all the time and he was just never really around to give her any attention. And Mike and Brian would still go hunting together. They would go duck hunting. And Brian would later say, you know, they would take these trips to go hunting. And like one time they were in the truck for 20 hours.
He and I took a trip in November out to Arkansas together. So we spent 20 hours in the car together. And I heard a lot about how unhappy he was, you know, with Denise. And he was not happy with not having sex. Of course, I didn't want him having sex with her.
And Brian sat there and listened to his best friend Mike talk about how his marriage, he felt like, was falling apart with his wife Denise. Like he thought maybe she was cheating on him because she would not touch him or sleep with him, and she was very distant and kind of cold, and that she was taking out large sums of money. Or
he thought something was going on with her. He thought she was using drugs. He thought he had seen money disappearing. She'd been taking cash withdrawals out of the ATM, which I knew was for travel for us when we would go out of town. But he kind of thought it might be for drugs or something.
And Brian, while he's sitting there listening to his best friend pour his heart out to him, he's sitting there thinking like, yeah, she's not sleeping with you, dude, because she's sleeping with me. Brian would later testify that like Mike would have to take these work trips. So like, let's say, so they lived in Florida. They lived near Tallahassee. That he would have a convention over in Destin, which is on the beach, and it's beautiful. And his wife, Denise, would go with him. While Mike was actually at the conventions, his best friend, Brian, would drive there too and spend the whole day with his wife. So he's at the convention and the meetings working and investing in his family's future. And she's out on the beach with his best friend living it up, right? And complaining about how he works so much. Like, can you imagine? And then Brian is riding with his best friend in the truck, listening to his friend pour his heart out, knowing that he is the one having an affair with his wife. Like, these people have no conscience at all. Brian, for work, sold life insurance. So he started talking Mike into getting life insurance because, I mean, it was his job. His job was to sell life insurance policies. And Mike knew he had a life insurance policy from years and years and years ago, but he knew that he needed something more substantial at the place that he was in his life. He made really good money now. So Mike went and talked to one of his old bosses, the guy that he really kind of felt like was a father figure in his life, and said, hey, do you think I should buy more life insurance? And his boss told him, the life that you live, the way that you kind of are dangerous. And he thought his duck hunting, like he would go out duck hunting sometimes by himself on a boat in the middle of nowhere. You know, anything could happen. You could get eaten by an alligator. You know, anything could happen. He said, I think it's a really good idea that you buy as much life insurance as you possibly can. In the case anything ever happens to you, your family will be fine. So he's got his best friend talking to him about it, sells the life insurance, being the shoulder for him to cry on. And then the guy that he really respects saying, well, yeah, I think it's a great idea. So Mike takes out a $1.5 million life insurance policy on top of what he already had. And Denise, at this point, she's getting fed up with being married to him, and she just kind of wants her husband, Mike, out of the way. And Brian wanted him out of the way, too, because he wanted to be with his best friend's wife, Denise. So he starts talking to Denise about, like, what are they going to do? Denise refuses to get a divorce. She does not want to divorce Mike because she doesn't want it to look bad on her. And then Brian would later say that Denise did not want to share their daughter with her husband if they got a divorce. So they started coming up with a plan on how to get rid of Mike.
One of the options, Mike worked a lot at night up at his office. And one of the options was that we could make it look as if there was a burglary of some sort up at his office, and that he got shot in some type of robbery or something up at his office. Denise didn't like that idea. I didn't like that idea, and Denise didn't like that idea, but primarily because there would be an investigation if something like that occurred. So another idea, we all used to go out on boats a lot, and Mike had a boat, and another option was that the four of us would go out on a boat out into the Gulf.
The four of you being who?
Me and Kathy and Denise and Mike. And we'd go out in a boat on the Gulf, and basically that Kathy and Mike would be pushed overboard, and that Denise and I would find a buoy way offshore that we could hold on to and either let the boat sink or let the boat take off on its own or whatever, and make it look like we had an accident on the water, and that Denise and I had survived the accident. Another scenario that we came up with was Mike and I going on a hunting trip together, and there being an accident where both he and I ended up in the water, and he drowned and I did not. Denise liked this idea.
Would it be fair to say that having the attention of being a widow was far better in her mind than being a divorcee?
Yes, sir. Better to be a rich widow than a poor divorcee. And her biggest concern with the divorce was she didn't want to share custody of Ansley with Mike. She was not going to have Ansley going back and forth to two different houses. She wasn't going to give that up.
On December 16th of 2000, which was actually Mike and Denise's 6th wedding anniversary, although they had been together for many years prior than this, Brian and Denise decided that this was the day that they were going to go through with their plan on killing Mike. Now, on the 16th, Denise and Mike had plans to go to this resort or this bed and breakfast and celebrate their wedding anniversary and hopefully rekindle their marriage. They were going to go that evening. But that morning, Mike was going to go duck hunting. So Brian told Mike he was going to show him this new place and all of this stuff. The night before, Brian decided he was going to take his wife to a concert, get her super drunk so she would sleep in the next morning. And that's what he did. So on the 15th, Brian goes to a concert with his wife, gets her slap tore up, and actually somehow, some way slips her some medication. I don't know what kind of medication, but it was a medication he would later say in court to make his wife sleep in late. The next morning on the 16th, he gets up bright and early. We're talking about before the sun is up. And he goes to meet Mike at a store. Now, Mike is thinking, okay, it's my wedding anniversary. I'm going to go spend the morning with my best friend. We're going to duck hunt for a few hours, and I'm going to go rekindle my marriage. He has no idea. This is so freaking upsetting, you guys. So sad. When he meets them at the store, Brian lets him know, hey, my phone is dead, so don't call me, just follow me to the new spot. And he did that a way no cell phone towers could trace his phone. He follows them. They go to this spot.
And because I knew where we were going hunting, I was in the back of the boat driving, and he was in the front.
Talking about a boat. What kind of boat are we talking about? We're talking about a large airboat, or what are we talking about?
It was a what's called a canoe. It's basically a canoe that has a flat back that you can put a small motor on the back of it.
I'm familiar with canoes. Canoes can be a little tipsy.
This
boat
boat,
the same way?
This boat was, yes, basically like a canoe, so pretty tippy.
Okay. So you put the boat in the water and you're heading out and you're driving?
Yes, sir. I was driving, and I know I was very concerned about the time. Everything had taken longer than what I had anticipated, and I had to be back in town early enough in time to meet my father-in-law for my alibi trip to occur. And so we headed out, and there was a deep area, maybe a couple hundred yards from the landing that we put in at. And we got to that area that I knew was a deep area, and I don't remember exactly how I got him to stand up, but I don't know if I pretended something was wrong with the motor or the weight in the boat was off or something, but I basically stopped the boat and got him to stand up, and when he did, I pushed him into the water. So he was in the water, and he was like struggling, and the motor of the boat was still running, and I pulled off just a little bit to get kind of away from him so that he couldn't reach back into the boat. And I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know if he was trying to swim, or I didn't know what was going on, but what I came to find out, or eventually realized, was he was taking the waders and the jacket off. And he got those off, and I think I forgot to tell you about this part before, but I remember now that area of the lake had a lot of snags, a lot of dead trees that come up out of the water, and there's a lot of stumps that come up out of the water. And he swam over to one of those stumps and held on to it. And he was panicking, and I was panicking, and none of this was like going well. I thought it was going to go. And I didn't know what to do. But he started to yell. And I didn't know how to get out of that situation. And so I had my in the boat. And so I loaded my gun, and I made 1 or 2 circles around, and I ended up circling closer towards him, and he was in the water, and as I passed by, I shot him.
Then he went over there. He said that he stuck his arm in the water and he had to get his arm wet, and he pulled his body up, brought his body over to where the vehicle was. And he said that the way that you put the boat in, like it was at an angle. So he just pulled his white SUV up to it, and he drug his body, his best friend's body, into the back of his truck, closed it, pushed the stuff out, like the boat out or whatever, and he hauled butt and he went home. Now he got home and it was still bright and early in the morning, and he crawled into bed with his wife because he was supposed to meet his father-in-law that morning to go hunting with him, and he called his father-in-law from the house. Now there's a phone record showing that Brian was at home, okay? He said that after he called his father-in-law, he kind of just kissed his wife or said something to his wife just enough so she would know that he was at home in bed, but didn't want to wake her up. He said that when he went back outside to his truck,
I went back out to the driveway to leave. And when I went out to the driveway, my driveway was angled, and I was walking behind my truck, and I saw out of the back tailgate, blood was coming out of the back of my tailgate and dripping onto the driveway. And that freaked me out, so I rinsed that off.
he said he freaked out. He got a water hose. He cleaned off the driveway real quick, and then he left because he had to figure out what to do with his best friend's body now at this point. Long story short, he ends up driving like 60 miles away, and he goes to a Walmart, and he starts buying all of this stuff like a tarp and, rope and weights, because he was planning on going to a different river and like weighing him down and putting him in there so he wouldn't be found. And he actually runs into a friend there. So that makes him panic even more. He gets all the stuff and he goes to this other river or whatever in Florida. And he said when he gets to this like lake that the water had receded. It was low tide.
Parts of it were dry, and like the other lakes, there were areas in the lake that had puddles of water or mud. And my thinking was, if I got him there, I could take him out to one of those water holes or mud holes and put him in one of those, and that would be a safe place that he wouldn't be found.
He just needed to hurry up. He's got his best friend's body in the trunk of his, or in the back of his SUV. He backs up and he puts the body on this tarp and he starts dragging it over to where the water had receded, and he starts digging a hole. He figured, okay, he'd bury him there, and then when the water comes back, it would cover it. So as he starts digging the hole, he sees a car coming. A car comes up and he just kind of like covers it, makes like it's nothing. The guy gets out, they talk for a bit. Like his best friend's body is literally laying over there on a tarp and he's talking to another guy. He would later testify in court that he got the vibe that this was actually some sort of law enforcement. He was going to hunt or fish or whatever out there himself. So they just made small talk for a minute and then he left. He ended up getting everything, buried and covered up, and then he left. He leaves and goes to meet with his family and his wife's family about like a Christmas dinner. Later that evening, when Denise's husband didn't come home, just as planned, she starts panicking and calling his mom, calling her sister, her family, and then eventually calls 911 to report her husband, Mike, missing. They would soon find her husband, Mike's truck and boat and stuff at the Seminole River. Hundreds of man hours were spent looking in that river. There was helicopters, there was divers, there was boats, there was people all in the community. This man just before this, this man who's making almost $250,000 a year, okay, back in the 1990s and early 2000s, would go and volunteer and ring the Salvation Army bell, like out in front of Walmart and different stores, to volunteer his time for the Salvation. Like, this is the kind of man that he was. He was a good man, and the whole community was devastated that he was missing. His brother, his mother. Oh my gosh, his mother was losing her doggone mind about her baby boy. And so these people were out there looking. Brian would come out there and look with his father. His father's name, I believe, was Mark.
My dad was just real determined, and he took us to a spot. I knew he was going to be there, but he took us to a spot, and sure enough, there was Mike's boat. So we found his boat.
And Mark was just crying. He looked at Mike as a son too. Brian would later testify in court that his dad would keep him out there. Like, even when he would say, "Dad, okay, that's enough," his dad just would refuse. They would be out there till all hours of the night, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, because he did not want to give up on Mike. And Brian is literally in the boat with his dad, knowing that he killed his best friend. And his dad is like out here searching for him. A whole mess, you guys. This went on for weeks. Weeks turned into months. And then eventually investigators came out there and they saw all these alligators. And they said, well, there's no body found. He had to have been eaten by an alligator. So at this point, no criminal investigation is opened. It is just assumed that he was eaten by an alligator. And the grieving wife, she was never on the news like pleading for answers or wanting to push the investigation because she was just so hurt. Really, it's because she planned this with her lover. And they basically just closed the case. And then 6 months later, after his disappearance, all of these things started popping up, like a hat was found in the water and his fishing license was found in the water. Like 6 months later, after all these people had been searching for months, right? Hundreds and hundreds of people searching. Now, 6 months later, all these things pop up. But they popped up because in order for her to claim his life insurance policies, which were well over $1.5 million, she had to get a death certificate. In order to get a death certificate, they had to, show that he was missing. Typically, that kind of thing would take 5 years if a body doesn't show up. If you guys know the whole, like, Carol Baskin, she had to wait 5 years in order to claim that for her husband. Well, Denise was able to rush it in 6 months because she had so many people on her side and people that felt bad for her. And the main person that was able to help her rush this life insurance thing was Brian and his dad.
Again, it was actually my dad, because he was concerned about Denise, and he wanted her to get her money so she could pay her bills. And he pushed it through the hoops that needed to happen for her to end up getting the money quickly.
And so before you know it, she cashed in a $1.5 million life insurance policy for her husband. Now, if this isn't crazy enough, things are about to get even weirder. Not long after this whole situation, Brian divorces his wife, Kathy. And then Brian moves into Denise's house, Mike's old house, and starts a full-on relationship with her, living there, sleeping in this man's bed and everything, y'all. They get married. Yes. Oh, yes. He marries his best friend's wife. Now he done kill, like they don't, oh my gosh, Jesus. He sold the life insurance policy, the whole thing. Now, this whole time, Mike's mother did not give up. I mean, this woman was standing on street corners, honey, with signs for years. Okay, years have gone by at this point. This ain't 6 months. This is years. She refuses to give up. As a matter of fact, when she went to Denise and said, I'm not giving up on finding my son and your husband, Denise flipped out on her.
After Mike disappeared, she threatened me. She said, if you do anything to get a criminal investigation, you're going to lose access to Ansley, my granddaughter. I'd already lost my husband. I lost Michael. And now she's telling me I'm going to lose Ansley.
And so she lost, the grandmother, which was Mike's mom, lost contact with her son's daughter because Denise cut off contact. Obviously, Denise did not want anybody pushing it because she didn't want anybody to find out that she was in on this murder of her husband, her high school sweetheart at that. So her and Brian are married. Okay, now years have gone by. Let's just say 10 years, whatever. Long time, okay? Her and Brian have a falling out. Imagine that. It's not a perfect marriage. What a coinky dink. And she ends up wanting a divorce from Brian. Ooh, girl, you don't want to make him mad. Okay, he knows all your secrets. She kicks him out. She decides she wants a divorce. Well, he loses his doggone mind, y'all. He goes crazy, okay? And he sneaks into her car. So here she goes one day. She's got it made. She's a single woman now. She's actually dating somebody else. She's a multimillionaire. She's done got rid of her husband. They've closed the case. Years have gone by. She feels like she's gotten away with it. She goes to get in her car, probably to go shopping, get her nails done, blah, blah, blah. And he pops up out the back seat, Brian does, puts the gun in her side, tells her he's going to kill himself, all this crazy mess. And she freaks out. I'm sure she did freak out because she knows he done did this to her husband. He's going to do it to you too, sister. She calms him down, tells him she's going to be with him. They're going to work it out, whatever she has to tell him. And then she calls the police. Now, the police come, they arrest him. They put him in jail. This woman goes up in the court and cries like she is so scared of him.
He was waiting for me in the back of my car with a gun. He grabbed the steering wheel. He just shoved the gun in my rib cage, screaming profanities uncontrollably at me. I will never be the same. I can't sleep. I can't eat because I only see him rising up out of the back of the car. Because all I feel is the gun shoved in my ribs. I can't have peace because I only hear his voice screaming and cussing at me. Please don't let him out.
She reads a letter that her daughter, who was a teenager at this time, not to let her stepdad out. Yes, her stepdad. This man is now raising his best friend's child. Probably calling him dad and everything. Oh my gosh, the disgust. I don't understand it. I do not understand it. And so Brian gets 20 years in prison for this, y'all. 20 years they sentenced him to. And this man is just sitting up in the court listening to this woman cry, like, probably thinking, now this heifer, she didn't cry when I killed her husband. And she was collecting that 1 point. Now she's crying. Okay. This woman thought she was so smart she was going to get away with it. Now, what do y'all think happened after this man was sitting in prison for 20 years thinking about everything? Now, I done told y'all, if you've watched any of my videos, I done told you when you get put in prison, baby, you ain't got nothing but time to think. Think. And I bet you them, because the mom was still pushing to find out what was happening to her son. She was like, or what happened to her son. At this point, it was like 17, 18 years later. Okay, this is like almost 2 decades. And she has not given up.
I don't have a body. I don't have anything to tell me what happened to my son. Supposedly, alligators ate him.
Like most of us would be as a mom. Like I'm not moving on. I'm not letting this go. This is my baby, right? The investigators go there to talk to him, and they're like, okay, do you know anything? Because they were suspicious of him and her, obviously, at this point, but they had no proof. They had nothing. And I'm sure they told him, I mean, I would think, this is my opinion, that they went in there and they were like, look, you just gonna let this woman sit out here and live? You gonna let her live this beautiful life? You're in here for 20 years. She's out here with the next man, you know, whatever happened. But Brian cut a deal, y'all. And I will leave his whole testimony down below. You guys can watch it. It was crazy. Cuts a deal with the state's attorney that he would be completely immune if he told everything, told where the body was and everything so they could go after her. Long story short, that's exactly what happened. He testified against her in court and she got life in prison. Yes, without the possibility of parole. She got first-degree murder. It was a bunch of stuff that went back and forth that said that the court came back and took that back because she wasn't actually the one that did it. But when I looked her up on the Florida Department of Corrections, she's still sentenced to life. Life plus 30 years, okay? And he only got the 20 years for what he did to her, so he's going to be out. And she's going to be in there. And the daughter, still don't know a lot about the daughter, which so much respect to her. I cannot imagine what the daughter thought. Her mom got sentenced when she was 19. So she still got to live the whole life raising her daughter. But to find out that for the daughter to find out that her mom had her dad killed. And then the guy that was her stepdad they plotted it together and then to come to find out, Lord, you guys, now I'm really spilling the tea. The guy, Brian, when he testified against her in court, he said that they started their affair in 1997, okay? In 1997. The daughter, her name is Ansley, I believe. She was born in 1999. So I wonder, was that even Mike's baby? Or did they ever actually do a DNA test to find out if that was her dad or not? What if it wasn't? And I understand if she didn't even want to have that test done. I could totally see, but you guys, and when I was watching this and researching this and watching him testify, all I could think about was it be your best friends always. It's the ones closest to you. You know, that saying is that betrayal never comes from the enemy. Betrayal comes from the people that you love, the people that are closest to you, right? Because otherwise it wouldn't be betrayal. You expect an enemy to attack you and do things to you. But just get a divorce. Why is that even an option to people, to kill your spouse? Just get a divorce. So crazy. And the mother, oh my gosh, I watched the mother testify and give her speech at the end. It was so gut-wrenching to hear this mother say that God would not let her give up on her son. God kept telling her to keep pushing to look for her son.
He didn't drown. He didn't get eaten by alligators. I had to find him and bring him home. Judge Hankinson, for the next 17 years, I made telephone calls, put up missing person signs, compiled my notes into a book, and had people post on social media for me. With the help of friends, we raised money and put up billboards. I bought ads in the Tallahassee Democrat and worked with the Twin City News, asking everyone to help me find Mike. I stood on street corners waving my picket signs with pictures of Mike on them. I was cussed out by ministers for being too close to their church. I wrote 2,600 letters to the governor of Florida asking for help in finding my son. I begged Fish and Game to do a criminal investigation. They told me Mike drowned and got eaten by alligators and there was no need for an investigation. They laughed at me and called me crazy. 9 months after Mike disappeared, his wife Denise told me if I continued to seek a criminal investigation, I would lose Ansley, my granddaughter, Mike's only child. Denise might as well have waved a red flag in front of a bull. I knew that she knew where Mike was or what happened to him. Judge Hankinson, I am a fighter, not a victim. I love Ansley, but Mike was my son. I became even more determined to find the truth. If I had not done what I did for 17 years, Mike's disappearance would have never been solved.
But she never gave up on it. And you know what, to come to find out, when she had her own investigators go, like her, looking for her son, they said that time of the year that he supposedly got eaten by alligators was cold, okay? And the water was cold. And alligators do not eat in cold water. So he couldn't have gotten eaten by alligators. And they were also saying that, alligators don't eat humans whole. Although I have seen things in, other parts of the world where they've eaten, little ones whole. But grown people. So it was a mess. So much. Have you guys heard about this situation? Have you heard about this story? How crazy. And think about the wife, Kathy, too. She testified in court, too. I'll leave that one linked down below, too. But think about her. She's married to this man, and she comes to find out later on that he's having an affair with her best friend, too, and that he's the one that killed her best friend's husband. And, oh, my gosh, you guys. This was so juicy. So juicy and sad and devastating. My heart goes out to the mother, the daughter. I can't imagine what she's gone through. And I think she's still in contact with her mom too. So I don't know, you guys. Have you heard about this situation? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. As always, my loves, thank you so, so much for watching this video. Please do not forget to like it. It's a free way that you can help your girl out. And until next time, I love you guys so, so, so very much. And I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye. Love you guys. Bye.